Did you ever stop and wonder how many drinks from the 1980s were quietly hiding dangers we never suspected? These beverages filled kitchens, lunchboxes, and party coolers without anyone questioning what was really inside them. So what were we actually drinking back then? Wine coolers in the 1980s were the drink of choice for anyone who wanted something fruity, fizzy, and just rebellious enough to feel grown up. They lined grocery store shelves in pastel-colored bottles, promising a refreshing escape that tasted more like candy than alcohol. People brought them to barbecues, pool parties, and beach trips without reading the ingredient list. The sulfites inside were invisible preservatives doing all the heavy lifting, keeping the liquid from spoiling. But sulfites were not harmless. For some people, even a few sips triggered reactions ranging from mild headaches to severe breathing problems. Asthmatics were especially vulnerable, though most had no idea their favorite summer drink could send them to the emergency room. Families passed bottles around picnic tables while quietly ingesting preservative levels that would later be deemed unsafe. When regulators finally caught on, sulfite limits were tightened and warning labels became mandatory. Looking back, it is unsettling to realize how casually people consumed something that carried hidden risks beneath its cheerful, fruity disguise. Apple juice in the 1980s was practically a childhood staple, poured into sippy cups, packed into lunchboxes, and served at every school cafeteria across the country. Parents trusted it completely because apples were healthy, natural, and wholesome. What nobody realized was that many of those bright red apples had been sprayed with a chemical called alar, designed to keep fruit on trees longer and improve their color. The chemical sounded harmless at the time, just another modern farming tool. But alar broke down into something troubling when heated or processed, releasing compounds that researchers later linked to serious health concerns, including cancer. Children absorbed far more of these residues than adults did. When news of the danger finally broke, the panic spread faster than anyone expected. Parents dumped juice boxes, schools pulled apple products from menus, and manufacturers scrambled to reformulate. Regulators banned alar shortly after, but the damage to public trust had already been done. For families who spent years believing they were giving their kids something healthy, the revelation felt like betrayal. Diet sodas sweetened with saccharin were everywhere in the 1980s, lining refrigerator doors and vending machines as the guilt-free alternative to sugary drinks. People cracked open those pink-labeled cans with confidence, believing they had found the perfect solution for watching their weight without sacrificing flavor. But saccharin had already drawn the attention of researchers who found disturbing results in laboratory studies linking the artificial sweetener to bladder tumors in animals. The findings were alarming enough that regulators required warning labels on every product containing saccharin, a small block of text that most people skimmed past without absorbing. Families stocked their pantries with these sodas anyway, trusting that anything sold in stores must be safe enough for daily consumption. The warning labels became background noise. It took decades before the labels were eventually removed after further studies softened the initial concerns. But for years, people drank something that officially carried a cancer warning, treating it like a harmless everyday refreshment, while science remained unsure of the true cost. Fresh squeezed orange juice from roadside stands and farmers' markets was a beloved ritual in the 1980s, especially in citrus regions where fruit seemed to fall straight from the tree into your glass. People lined up with empty jugs, watching as vendors pressed whole oranges through hand-cranked machines, the sweet smell filling the air. Parents believed they were giving their families something pure, untouched by factories or preservatives. But that lack of processing was exactly the problem. Without pasteurization, the juice could harbor bacteria like Salmonella or E. coli, invisible threats that multiplied rapidly in warm, sugary liquid. Children and anyone with weakened immune systems were especially vulnerable to infections that could turn a refreshing glass into a medical emergency. Health departments eventually cracked down on unpasteurized juice sales, requiring heat treatment or prominent warning labels. The once charming roadside tradition became tangled in regulations designed to protect the customers who loved it most. Today, that simple glass of fresh squeezed juice carries safety rules that would have seemed absurd to families who trusted every drop. Sports drinks in the 1980s promised hydration, electrolytes, and the kind of athletic edge that made every weekend warrior feel like a champion. They came in neon colors that glowed under gymnasium lights, and athletes gulped them down after games and long summer runs. What nobody questioned was how those bright colors stayed so evenly distributed instead of separating like oil and water normally would. The secret was brominated vegetable oil, an additive that kept citrus flavoring suspended throughout the drink. But bromine is also used in flame retardants, and the idea of consuming something with industrial chemical connections was not something manufacturers advertised. Researchers raised concerns about bromine accumulating in body tissues, potentially affecting thyroid function and causing neurological symptoms with prolonged exposure. Other countries began banning brominated vegetable oil entirely, while the United States allowed it to linger. Athletes who thought they were fueling their bodies with something healthy were actually consuming a chemical that most of the developed world considered too risky for food. It took decades before major brands finally removed it. Herbal energy tonics swept through the 1980s promising natural vitality without the jittery crash of coffee or the artificial buzz of caffeine pills. They lined health food store shelves with earthy labels and promises of ancient wisdom bottled for modern life. People trusted them because they sounded wholesome, made from plants used for centuries in traditional medicine. The star ingredient was ephedra, a plant extract that delivered a powerful stimulant effect capable of speeding up heart rates and suppressing appetite. Dieters loved it, athletes craved it, and anyone looking for an energy boost reached for it without hesitation. What nobody fully understood was how dangerous ephedra could be, especially for people with underlying heart conditions. Reports of heart attacks, strokes, and sudden deaths began piling up, eventually forcing regulators to investigate. The ban on ephedra came with devastating clarity, revealing that the herbal label had hidden a substance powerful enough to kill. Families who believed they were choosing something safer than synthetic energy drinks discovered that nature could be just as deadly when concentrated into a bottle. Fruit punches in the 1980s came in colors so vivid they practically glowed, staining lips, tongues, and tablecloths with shades of red that seemed to defy nature. Birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and school events were incomplete without a giant bowl of crimson liquid surrounded by floating orange slices. Kids lined up with paper cups, gulping down glass after glass of sweetness that tasted like summer and celebration combined. The brilliant red color came from red number 3, an additive that made everything from candy to beverages look irresistibly cheerful. But behind that festive shade was a chemical that researchers eventually linked to thyroid tumors in laboratory animals. The findings were serious enough that regulators banned red number 3 from cosmetics, acknowledging the danger when applied to skin. Yet somehow, the same dye remained approved for food and beverages, creating a strange contradiction that allowed children to swallow what adults could no longer safely wear. Families continued serving these punches without knowing the ingredient list carried something the government had already deemed unsafe in other forms. Caffeinated wine products emerged in the 1980s as a trendy hybrid for people who wanted the relaxation of alcohol and the buzz of caffeine in a single bottle. They were marketed as sophisticated refreshers, perfect for parties where guests wanted to stay energized while loosening up. The combination seemed clever because it promised the best of both worlds without the crash. But mixing stimulants with depressants created a dangerous illusion. The caffeine masked the sedative effects of alcohol, making drinkers feel more alert than they actually were. People underestimated their intoxication, drove when they should not have, and pushed their bodies past safe limits without realizing how impaired they truly were. Emergency rooms began seeing young adults arriving with alcohol poisoning, heart palpitations, and symptoms that confused even experienced doctors. Regulators eventually cracked down, forcing manufacturers to reformulate or pull their products entirely. The party drink that once seemed innovative became a cautionary tale about what happens when two powerful substances combine in ways the human body was never meant to handle. Raw milk in the 1980s was sold in some grocery stores and dairy stands as the purest, most natural form of nourishment a family could buy. Supporters claimed it was healthier, tastier, and filled with beneficial enzymes that pasteurization supposedly destroyed. Parents who distrusted modern food processing saw raw milk as a return to simpler times when families drank straight from the cow without factories interfering. The creamy liquid came in glass bottles with handwritten labels, looking wholesome enough to justify the extra cost. But raw milk is a perfect breeding ground for bacteria like Listeria, Salmonella, and E. coli, organisms that pasteurization was specifically designed to eliminate. Children, pregnant women, and elderly family members were especially vulnerable to infections that could cause permanent damage. Outbreaks linked to raw milk consumption grew more frequent and serious, forcing health departments to reconsider how freely it could be sold. Most states eventually banned or severely restricted raw milk sales, treating it as a public health hazard. For families who believed they were choosing something purer, the reality was dangerous. Sassafras root beer was a beloved tradition in many households during the 1980s. Brewed from scratch using bark and roots that gave the drink its distinctive earthy sweetness. Families passed down recipes through generations, boiling sassafras in large pots until the kitchen filled with a warm, spicy aroma. Kids watched impatiently as the liquid cooled, knowing the first sip would taste like nothing any store-bought soda could match. The flavor was complex, slightly medicinal but deeply satisfying, connecting people to traditions stretching back centuries. But sassafras contained a compound called safrole, and researchers discovered that safrole could cause liver damage and potentially contribute to cancer with prolonged exposure. The same ingredient that gave the drink its signature flavor turned out to be making it unsafe. When the Food and Drug Administration banned safrole from food and beverages, traditional root beer recipes became illegal to sell commercially. Home brewers either switched to safrole-free extracts or quietly continued their old methods, knowing the government had deemed their family recipe a health hazard. Something so nostalgic carried risks nobody suspected. Canned fruit juices in the 1980s lined pantry shelves in homes across the nation, promising convenience and nutrition in every brightly labeled container. Parents poured them into glasses at breakfast, packed them in lunchboxes, and offered them as wholesome alternatives to sugary sodas. What nobody realized was that the seams holding those cans together were soldered with lead, a toxic metal that slowly leached into the acidic juice inside. The longer the can sat on a shelf, the more lead migrated into the liquid that families drank without a second thought. Children, with their smaller bodies and developing brains, absorbed the contamination most readily. Doctors began noticing patterns of lead exposure in patients who had no obvious environmental source, and investigators eventually traced the problem back to canned beverages. When regulators demanded changes, manufacturers scrambled to develop lead-free soldering methods. The transition took years, leaving countless families to wonder how much damage had been done. Those cheerful cans that once symbolized modern convenience became reminders that packaging itself could carry dangers no ingredient list ever mentioned. Cyclamate-sweetened soft drinks were the original diet sensation, promising sweetness without calories in an era obsessed with slim waistlines. People reached for these drinks believing they had found the perfect compromise between indulgence and health. The sweetener made everything taste remarkably close to sugar, far closer than later alternatives ever managed. Families kept refrigerators stocked with cyclamate beverages, treating them as smart choices for weight-conscious adults and children alike. But laboratory studies eventually linked cyclamate to bladder cancer in animals, and the findings sent shockwaves through an industry built on artificial sweetness. Regulators moved quickly, banning cyclamate from food and beverages in the United States while other countries debated the evidence. The drinks disappeared from shelves almost overnight, replaced by saccharin formulas that carried their own warning labels. For people who had consumed cyclamate daily for years, the news felt like betrayal dressed in a diet label. The sweetener that promised guilt-free enjoyment turned out to carry questions science still has not fully answered. Yellow dye number 5 gave drinks in the 1980s that impossibly bright citrus glow that made lemonade, sports drinks, and soda look like liquid sunshine. Kids loved the vivid colors, and parents assumed anything sold in grocery stores must be safe. But yellow 5 triggered allergic reactions in a significant portion of the population, especially people sensitive to aspirin. Symptoms ranged from hives and swelling to breathing difficulties that sent people rushing to emergency rooms without understanding what caused the attack. The problem was that ingredient labels did not require specific dye disclosure, so consumers had no way to know which products contained the troublesome additive. People would react to one drink but not another, never realizing the color itself was the culprit. When mandatory labeling finally arrived, families discovered the dye lurked in far more products than anyone imagined. Suddenly, that cheerful yellow glow looked less like sunshine and more like a warning sign. For those who had suffered unexplained reactions for years, the truth came as both relief and frustration at how long the danger remained invisible. Powdered drink mixes were kitchen staples in the 1980s, promising gallons of refreshment from a single envelope stirred into tap water. Families on budgets loved how affordable they were, and kids loved the sweet, fruity flavors that turned ordinary water into something exciting. Parents mixed pitcher after pitcher during hot summers, believing they were keeping everyone hydrated with something harmless. But some of these powders came from manufacturers who sourced ingredients without rigorous testing, and heavy metals like lead and arsenic sometimes contaminated the final product. The contamination was invisible, tasteless, and impossible to detect without laboratory analysis. Children who drank these mixes daily accumulated toxins without anyone realizing. When health agencies eventually tested popular brands, the results shocked families who had trusted these products for years. Regulations tightened, testing became mandatory, and contaminated batches were pulled from shelves. But the damage lingered in the memories of parents who wondered how many glasses of poison they had unknowingly served. The bright packets that once meant summer fun now carry lessons learned too late. Quinine tonic water was the sophisticated mixer of choice in the 1980s, adding that distinctive bitter edge to gin and tonics served at cocktail parties and backyard gatherings. People sipped it casually, enjoying the crisp taste without realizing quinine was actually a powerful medicine with real effects on the body. Early tonic waters contained far higher concentrations than modern versions allow, enough to cause side effects most drinkers never connected to their evening cocktail. Some people experienced ringing in their ears, dizziness, or visual disturbances after drinking what they assumed was just flavored soda water. More seriously, quinine can affect heart rhythm, creating risks for people with cardiac conditions who had no idea their mixer was medically active. Bartenders poured it freely, hosts stocked it generously, and nobody thought to check labels for warnings that did not exist. When regulators finally limited quinine concentrations, the classic tonic taste changed noticeably. Purists who complained about the new formula never realized that the bitterness they missed was actually a dose of medicine their bodies were better off without. Aloe vera drinks appeared in health food stores during the 1980s, promising digestive benefits, skin improvements, and the kind of natural healing that appealed to anyone skeptical of conventional medicine. The thick, slightly bitter liquid came in glass bottles with labels covered in promises about ancient remedies. People drank it daily, believing they were nourishing their bodies with something pure and plant-based. What most consumers did not know was that whole leaf aloe vera contains compounds called anthraquinones, which give the plant its laxative effect but also raised serious concerns in laboratory studies. Researchers found evidence suggesting these compounds might contribute to cancer with long-term exposure, especially in the concentrated amounts found in beverages. The inner gel was considered safer, but many early drinks used the whole leaf without distinguishing between parts. When health agencies began classifying certain aloe compounds as possible carcinogens, the industry scrambled to reformulate. Families who had faithfully consumed these drinks for years suddenly questioned whether their pursuit of natural health had exposed them to unnatural risks. Caffeinated malt beverages burst onto the scene, targeting young adults who wanted energy and intoxication in the same brightly colored can. These drinks were sweet enough to mask the alcohol, caffeinated enough to keep drinkers awake, and marketed with imagery that screamed party culture. College campuses became ground zero for a dangerous trend regulators had not yet addressed. The combination was deceptively hazardous because caffeine prevented drinkers from feeling how intoxicated they were. People consumed far more alcohol than their bodies could safely process, believing they were alert and in control. Emergency rooms reported alarming spikes in alcohol poisoning cases, blackouts, and accidents linked directly to these beverages. Some incidents ended in tragedy, forcing families to confront how a legal drink had destroyed lives. When regulators finally demanded manufacturers remove caffeine from alcoholic beverages, the products either disappeared or were reformulated. The brief era of caffeinated malt beverages left a legacy of hospitalizations and hard lessons about mixing stimulants with depressants in drinks designed to appeal to those least equipped to handle them. Diet shakes containing phenylpropanolamine promised easy weight loss in the 1980s, offering meal replacement options that seemed too good to be true. Women especially embraced these products, blending them for breakfast and lunch while dreaming of smaller dress sizes. The shakes tasted like chocolate or vanilla milkshakes, making dieting feel less like deprivation. But phenylpropanolamine, the active ingredient suppressing appetite, carried risks that would take years to fully understand. The compound raised blood pressure and constricted blood vessels in ways that proved particularly dangerous for young women. Reports of hemorrhagic strokes began accumulating, striking victims who seemed far too young for such catastrophic events. Investigators eventually connected the dots between these diet products and the neurological emergencies filling hospital wards. When regulators finally banned phenylpropanolamine, the announcement came with devastating case studies of lives cut short by something sold as a simple diet aid. Families mourned loved ones who had only wanted to lose a few pounds and instead lost everything. The shakes that promised transformation delivered tragedy. Fountain drinks in the 1980s flowed from dispensers in every fast food restaurant, diner, and convenience store across America. People filled cups without thinking, enjoying the fizzy refreshment that came with every meal. What nobody realized was that some older dispensers contained lead-lined components that slowly contaminated every drink poured through them. The acidic nature of carbonated beverages accelerated the leaching process, pulling lead into sodas that children and adults consumed multiple times per week. Restaurant workers refilled cups endlessly, serving customers poison disguised as refreshment. The contamination was invisible and tasteless, impossible to detect without sophisticated testing. When health investigators began examining lead exposure sources beyond paint and pipes, fountain equipment emerged as a surprising culprit. Regulations forced the replacement of lead-containing components, but the transition happened quietly. Families who had made fountain drinks a regular habit never knew how many contaminated servings they had consumed. It is unsettling to think that something as simple as refilling a soda cup once carried risks nobody ever mentioned. Comfrey root tea was a favorite among herbal medicine enthusiasts in the 1980s, brewed from a plant with centuries of traditional use for healing wounds and soothing digestive troubles. Health food stores sold dried comfrey root alongside chamomile and peppermint, treating it as just another gentle herbal option. Families steeped the roots in hot water, drinking cups of earthy liquid, believing they were supporting their health the way generations had done. But comfrey contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids, compounds that accumulate in the liver and can cause serious damage over time. Unlike an immediate reaction that would signal danger, the harm built slowly, sometimes taking years before symptoms appeared. By the time someone developed liver problems, they rarely connected it to the tea they had been drinking faithfully. When researchers documented the connection between comfrey consumption and liver disease, regulators moved to ban oral comfrey products. The herb that seemed so gentle turned out to be quietly destroying the organs of people who trusted it most. Those who embraced natural healing discovered that nature sometimes hides poisons behind innocent appearances. Instant breakfast drinks with excessive iron fortification were marketed to parents in the 1980s as the perfect solution for rushed mornings and picky eaters. The powdered mixes promised complete nutrition in a glass, turning ordinary milk into a vitamin-packed meal. Mothers stirred chocolate or vanilla powder into cups, believing they were giving children a healthy head start before school. but some formulations contained iron levels far beyond what growing bodies could safely absorb. Iron is essential in small amounts, but excessive doses can overwhelm a child's system and cause toxicity. The symptoms often mimicked stomach flu, so parents rarely connected discomfort to the morning drink they trusted completely. When researchers examined fortification levels across popular brands, the findings prompted immediate reformulation. Regulators tightened limits on how much iron could be added to products marketed toward children. Families who relied on these drinks suddenly questioned what else might be hiding behind cheerful packaging. The convenience that seemed like a parenting victory now carries hard lessons learned too late. Imported fruit nectars from tropical countries filled grocery store shelves in the 1980s, promising exotic flavors that domestic brands could not match. Families reached for guava, papaya, and passion fruit drinks that tasted like vacation in a can. The bright labels featured images of lush orchards and promised pure, natural refreshment from faraway places. But agricultural regulations varied wildly between countries, and some imported nectars carried pesticide residues from chemicals already banned in the United States. These compounds had been outlawed domestically because of proven health risks, yet they continued contaminating products that crossed borders without adequate testing. Children drank these nectars believing they were enjoying something healthy and special. When inspectors finally caught contaminated shipments, the recalls came with alarming details about what families had consumed. Regulations tightened around imported beverages, but the damage to trust lingered long after shelves were cleared. Those tropical flavors that promised paradise delivered a stark reminder that borders do not stop danger. Aspartame drink mixes flooded the market in the 1980s as the newest miracle sweetener, promising 0 calories without the aftertaste that plagued earlier options. People stirred the powder into water, creating instant lemonade or fruit punch that tasted close to the sugary originals. Eaters embraced these mixes enthusiastically, drinking pitcher after pitcher without any sense of concern. But aspartame breaks down into phenylalanine, an amino acid that poses serious dangers to people born with phenylketonuria. For these individuals, consuming phenylalanine can cause brain damage and severe developmental problems. The condition affects roughly 1 in every 15,000 births, meaning thousands of families faced hidden risks they knew nothing about. Early aspartame products carried no warnings about this danger, leaving vulnerable consumers completely unprotected. When mandatory labeling finally arrived, it came too late for some who had already suffered consequences. The sweetener that promised guilt-free refreshment revealed how easily a population can be exposed to targeted harm without anyone raising an alarm. Homemade grain alcohol punch appeared at community events, college parties, and backyard gatherings throughout the 1980s, mixed by amateurs who had no idea how dangerous their concoctions truly were. People combined high-proof spirits with fruit juice and soda, creating drinks that masked the alcohol content behind sweetness. Guests filled cups without knowing how much they were consuming, trusting that hosts had created something safe. But unregulated alcohol mixtures varied wildly in strength, and some batches contained enough grain alcohol to cause poisoning within a few servings. Young people especially fell victim, their inexperience leaving them unable to recognize warning signs until too late. Emergency rooms treated cases of severe alcohol poisoning that never would have happened with commercially regulated products. When liability laws tightened and awareness campaigns spread, these homemade punches slowly disappeared from gatherings. The freewheeling party culture that once celebrated dangerous mixtures gave way to caution born from tragedy. Those who survived learned that hospitality without responsibility carries devastating consequences. Slush drinks from convenience store machines were summertime favorites in the 1980s, drawing kids and adults alike with their icy sweetness and rainbow of artificial colors. People pressed buttons, watched the frozen swirl fill their cups, and slurped happily without wondering how those machines worked. Inside the dispensers, cooling systems used glycol-based compounds to keep the mixture at the perfect temperature. But worn seals, poor maintenance, and aging equipment sometimes allowed coolant to leak directly into the product being served. Glycol compounds are the same chemicals found in antifreeze, and even small amounts can cause serious harm when ingested. Customers reported strange tastes, unexplained illness, and symptoms doctors struggled to diagnose until someone tested the drinks. When investigators traced outbreaks back to malfunctioning machines, the findings prompted industry-wide inspections and new maintenance requirements. The frozen treats that once seemed innocent now carry reminders of how easily mechanical failure can turn refreshment into poison. Those rainbow slushies taught a generation that simple pleasures can hide industrial dangers. Generic peanut butter was a gamble, but you took it. It came in a tan jar with a white label that said peanut butter and nothing else. No cartoon bears, no crunchy option. Just oil on top, cement on the bottom, and a knife stuck somewhere in between. You stirred until your hand ached. You scraped and scooped. You tasted it and blinked twice. It was bitter. It was bland. But it was peanut butter, and peanut butter meant sandwiches. You smeared it on stale bread and added jelly if you had it. Sometimes just sugar. Sometimes nothing. It stuck to the roof of your mouth and stayed there. But it kept you full until dinner. It did not spread well, and it never looked appetizing. But it filled a sandwich with calories, and that was the only thing that mattered. It was cheaper than the name brand and lasted longer too, mostly because no one was sneaking spoonfuls when mom was not looking. You brought it to school in a paper bag and traded it if you were lucky. But even if nobody wanted it, you still ate every bite, because it was food, and in the 1970s that was enough. It came in giant cans with awkward labels and colors that looked like they belonged in the back of a thrift store. But store-brand baked beans were a kitchen staple when money was tight in the 1990s. Sweet, sticky, mushy, and just barely holding together, they were the side dish that became a main course more often than anyone admitted. You dumped them in a pot or microwaved them in a bowl. Sometimes you added hot dogs. Sometimes you just ate them on toast or with a spoon. They were loaded with sugar and syrupy sauce, and somehow that made them feel like comfort, like something your mom made when there was not much in the pantry, but she still wanted to give you something warm. They were kid-friendly, adult-tolerable, and always available. The big can lasted for days if you were careful. And if your family shopped by price per ounce, beans were a no-brainer. These were the foods that made dinners stretch and reminded you that meals did not have to be fancy to count. Speaking of caffeinated, how could we ever forget Mellow Yellow? Despite coming earlier, these guys took a completely opposite direction from their competitors and thought, let's not make something that's like coffee and a soda, let's make a caffeinated lemonade. Down on the East Coast, people absolutely loved Mellow Yellows. Maybe the others should have learned from history, because in the East, this did pretty well. Mellow Yellow was the kind of drink that made you think sodas each need their own identity. Tying matters with a sweet lemon bow on top was the fact that it was extremely refreshing on hot summer days. A few cans of this took the heat off, especially if you were in an air conditioner. Drinks rarely last as long as it did, and it recently attempted a national expansion in the early 2000s, but it didn't really pan out. Now it is just an East Side memory. Back in the 1970s, when innovation seemed to touch every aisle of the grocery store, Kraft Foods unleashed a quirky creation that left taste buds buzzing: Kugel-flavored peanut butter. This wasn't your average peanut spread. Kugel came in a rainbow of unusual flavors: chocolate, banana, cinnamon, and even vanilla. The jars were just as fun, sporting googly-eyed cartoon mascots that seemed to promise, "This isn't your mom's PB&J." For a brief moment, Kugel captured the hearts and sandwiches of adventurous eaters everywhere. Parents appreciated the novelty, while kids loved the sweet twist on a classic staple. Chocolate peanut butter on toast? Cinnamon peanut butter on apple slices? The possibilities felt endless. It was smooth enough to spread on bread, but thick enough to cling to a spoon for late-night snacking. Despite its charm, Kugel's time on shelves was short-lived. By the late 1970s, it had vanished, likely due to limited demand or an overcrowded peanut butter market. And while it never saw a true comeback, Kugel lives on in the memories of those who grew up with it, or in the wistful stories told by parents to their kids. Boxed macaroni and cheese was not just dinner. It was a budget strategy. The box cost less than $1 and could feed an entire family if you got creative. Elbow noodles, a packet of neon orange powder, and a splash of milk, if you had it. If not, water worked. Maybe some margarine, maybe not. You stirred and stirred until it turned into something thick, hot, and just cheesy enough. It was not gourmet, but it was fast, filling, and guaranteed nobody would complain. Much. Sometimes you added chopped hot dogs or canned tuna. Other times it was just mac and cheese and a prayer. The box said, "Serves 4," but you could stretch it to 6 if you were desperate. It was not about flavor, it was about making sure everyone got a scoop. The powder never fully dissolved, the noodles always clumped. But it hit the spot in a way that made you feel like you were getting away with something. There were no gourmet breadcrumbs, no truffle oil, just a pot, a box, and a wooden spoon. If you were lucky, you got the store brand. 10 cents cheaper and twice as clumpy. You made it after school. You made it at midnight. You made it when payday was still too far away. In the 1970s, boxed mac and cheese was not a side dish. It was the whole meal. And somehow, it always did the job. It came in a plastic tray with a packet of powder, a slick pouch of sauce, and dreams of an actual meal. Maruchan yakisoba was the 1990s answer to, "I want takeout, but I have a $2 bill and an old microwave." These things were everywhere, from gas stations to discount grocery stores, and if you were broke, they felt like a big step up from a plain pack of ramen. Just add water to the fill line, microwave it until your house smelled like steamed plastic and soy, then stir in the sauce. The noodles were weirdly soft, the sauce was super salty, and the tray always burned your fingers. But it worked. It felt like an upgrade, like fast food's dollar menu came to your kitchen. For teens with no allowance or parents trying to keep grocery costs down, yakisoba bowls were a little moment of indulgence. They filled you up. They took no effort, and they made you feel like you were eating something with flavor, even if it was mostly sodium and MSG. Some kids ate these every day after school. Others lived off them in college. No one thought they were healthy, but no one cared. They were warm, filling, and just a little exciting, especially when you could not afford anything else. Moving on from the usual Pepsi-Coke debate, Hires root beer is something teenagers around the country might be familiar with if you have ever had it. Remember picking up one of these at the grocery store and lying about it being for your dad? Does not help that they tasted pretty great too, like a root beer vanilla float, as some references say. Hires was popular with a lot more people than just kids because it was simply just a good soft drink. Ticking every box off of the list, whether that was going down smooth or tasting good, while having a great finish, Hires temporarily hit gold with this one. While good for the company that they would get lucky many more times, it was bad for the customers when they decided to discontinue it to focus on their rising star, the A&W brand. Sometimes the strangest ideas become cult classics. Take Hubba Bubba soda, for example. Yes, a bubblegum-flavored soda. Launched by the makers of the popular Hubba Bubba gum in the 1980s, this drink had the audacity to turn our expectations upside down. Imagine the sweet, chewy taste of bubblegum in liquid form. It was a fizzy, pink concoction that somehow made perfect sense in a world where kids were always chasing the next big flavor. Whether you loved it or didn't quite know what to make of it, one thing was clear. Hubba Bubba soda was unforgettable. The product's bright pink hue and distinctly sugary taste made it a hit with adventurous soda drinkers, though it was as much a curiosity as a drinkable treat. For a brief moment, this quirky product was part of the 80s pop culture landscape, lining shelves right alongside other iconic products like Fruit Stripe gum and Crystal Pepsi. Sadly, like many eccentric 90s concoctions, Hubba Bubba soda vanished, likely due to limited demand and the challenge of maintaining that bubblegum flavor in a carbonated drink. Despite occasional whispers about a comeback, it hasn't returned. Powdered milk was never a treat, it was a chore. You mixed it in a plastic pitcher, hoping the lumps would disappear. They never did. It smelled like chalk and tasted like a dare. If you drank it warm, forget it. That was a punishment, not a beverage. but it got poured into cereal, added to mashed potatoes, and stirred into baking mixes like it belonged, because it had to. Milk was expensive. Powdered milk came in giant paper envelopes and lasted forever. Not because you loved it, but because it was always there. You stirred it with a spoon until your wrist hurt. Then you stirred it more. Your mom would say, "Let it sit, it tastes better cold." And somehow, she was right, kind of. It was used to stretch the real milk when you were lucky enough to have some. Half and half was not a fancy coffee blend. It was how you survived a dry week. Powdered milk showed up in food pantry boxes, in school kitchens, in battered community centers. It was dependable, it was disliked, and it was necessary. Today, it is mostly used for baking. But if you were poor in the 1970s, you drank it straight, and you learned to stop complaining. The box was never flashy. No cartoon tiger, no sparkly prizes inside. Just a plain design, a generic name, and maybe a smiling bowl of cereal on the front. Store-brand cornflakes were the ultimate no-frills breakfast in the 1990s, and if your family was broke, it was probably the first thing you ate that day. They came in a huge box, usually cheaper than $2, and lasted all week. The flakes were thinner, a little more stale, and the flavor always felt like it was missing something. But they were there, with dry milk or regular milk, with sugar on top or plain. Some kids got creative and crushed them over pudding or mixed them with peanut butter. They were simple, boring, and weirdly comforting. Because when you woke up hungry, you did not care about brand names. You cared about food that was fast and available. And these cornflakes were always available. They showed up in school mornings, late-night snacks, and quiet weekends when there was not much else in the kitchen. You would never ask for them, but you would always eat them. That was the deal. And that big yellow box stood for something a little more than cereal. It stood for getting by. The tin crinkled when you peeled it open. The crust never browned quite right. And the filling? Well, let's just say it was a surprise every time. Hubba Bubba Soda was one that tried to step away from the pre-established molds of caffeine, caramel, citrus, and all the other popular flavors people want to see in sodas. Hubba Bubba tried to pave a new path that worked with another product, the Hubba Bubble gum. You can probably see where this is going. The gum was so popular that when companies considered expanding the product line, the enthusiastic response from the public was, "Why not?" It came onto the scene and received mixed reviews. Casual soda drinkers had a mostly forgettable first impression, while soda enthusiasts were impressed, yet overall, it did not work well. More flavors tried to come out like blue raspberry and strawberry, but Hubba Bubba Soda would go bubba-bye sooner or later, although it was a fan favorite for many 13-year-olds in the Upper East Sides. In 1987, High C took the juice world by storm with a citrusy green concoction that slimed its way into pop culture history, Ecto Cooler. Introduced as a tie-in to the real Ghostbusters cartoon, this fluorescent drink was a real liquid icon. Packaged with Slimer's mischievous grin splashed across the box, it became the ultimate lunchbox flex for kids. Bright green juice might not sound appetizing, but Ecto Cooler was surprisingly delicious, a zesty, tangy orange flavor that hid its true hue like a paranormal secret. Its success was no ghost story. Ecto Cooler rode the Ghostbusters wave into the 1990s, outliving the cartoon itself by nearly a decade. But like many pop culture phenomena, its time eventually ran out. By 2001, it was rebranded and quietly exorcised from grocery store shelves. Some say it was a victim of shifting trends. Others believe it simply outlived its supernatural charm. Fans weren't ready to let it go. In 2016, Coca-Cola revived Ecto Cooler for the Ghostbusters reboot, bringing Slimer and that citrusy kickback. It vanished again, but not before reigniting a wave of nostalgia. To this day, petitions and do-it-yourself recipes float around online, proving that Ecto Cooler still haunts the hearts of its fans. Government cheese was not just food, it was survival. It came in a giant, nondescript cardboard box, stamped like it was military surplus. Inside was a solid orange brick that could survive a nuclear blast. You could slice it, melt it, fry it, and it would still taste like school lunch and desperation. It never quite melted right. It stuck to pans, clumped in sandwiches, and turned casseroles into rubber. But when you had nothing else, it was gold. It made grilled cheese, it made macaroni edible, and it lasted forever in the fridge. Every poor kid in the 1970s remembers peeling back that thin paper and trying to cut a straight slice. You never got it right. It was always crooked, but that cheese kept you full, and that mattered more than anything. This was not grocery store cheese. This was a government-issued food safety net. It was part of a national aid program, and for many families, it was the difference between dinner and no dinner. It showed up uninvited, unbranded, and unforgettable. And when it was gone, you missed it, even if you pretended not to. These days, people pay top dollar for vintage processed cheese. Back then, it came free, and you still felt the cost. Hamburger helper was a staple in 1990s kitchens, but not everyone had the hamburger part. That was optional. The box said, just add meat. But the truth was, if you had a box and some water, dinner was already halfway done. The cheesy powder, the flimsy elbow noodles, the tiny spice packet, it was all designed to stretch whatever scraps you had into something hot and filling. No ground beef? You used beans. A little leftover chicken? You shredded it real small. And sometimes, you just skipped the meat altogether and hoped the sauce would do the talking. It was salty, it was starchy, it was magic if you were hungry enough. You could find it for under $1, and the serving sizes were always generous. You ate it with cheap bread or frozen vegetables, sometimes both. It was the kind of dinner you made without needing to think, and that was part of its power. It showed up when your family needed something easy, something cheap, and something that would last a couple of days. Hamburger helper without the hamburger was not glamorous, but it was comfort. And it reminded you how far a little food and a little grit could go. As you can imagine, the more popular players in the scene and their influence will be felt heavily throughout this list, and Surge is one of those examples. Maybe by now you can tell that Pepsi and Coca-Cola had an ongoing rivalry in an attempt to find the next best soda. One they could sell to Americans of all ages, sex, color, ethnicity, and any other descriptor for people. Basically, they wanted the next jackpot, and Pepsi hit that with Mountain Dew. Surge was Coca-Cola's counter to the ever-increasing popularity of Dew. Everyone has a Dew phase after all, so we can get what they were thinking. Sadly, old Coke would never learn because Surge was also just another stronger Mountain Dew. Plus, the rumors about it being unhealthy did not help much at schools and family homes. It got discontinued because it just was not worth the time and cost anymore. Few snacks captured the neon spirit of the 1990s quite like Planters cheese balls. These bite-sized, cheese-dusted orbs were a cultural event. Packaged in a bright blue canister that popped off store shelves, they practically begged to be grabbed during every grocery run. And once you opened that iconic foil seal, there was no turning back. The cheese dust was unstoppable. Your fingers were orange for hours, no matter how many napkins you used. Cheese balls were a perfect marriage of flavor and crunch. The texture was airy yet satisfying, and the sharp, tangy cheese flavor was impossible to forget. Their popularity extended beyond snack time. They became a staple at parties, movie nights, and anywhere a little extra flavor was needed. So why did they disappear in 2006? Planters never gave a clear reason, but some speculate it was due to declining sales as tastes shifted toward healthier snacks. Fans, however, refused to move on. After years of online petitions and social media campaigns, Planters briefly revived cheese balls in 2018, and they sold out faster than you could say cheesy goodness. Unfortunately, their comeback was short-lived, leaving us to wonder if the blue canisters will ever make another glorious return. Off-brand cereal in a bag was not cool, but it was affordable. No cartoon mascots, no box, no toy surprise, just a giant plastic sack of crunchy shapes that looked almost, but not quite, like the name brand. Fruity Circles instead of Fruit Loops, Corn Crunch instead of Corn Pops, Marshmallow Magic instead of Lucky Charms, and every flavor was a little off. You poured it into a bowl with powdered milk and called it breakfast. It got soggy fast. It stuck to your teeth. But you still ate 2 bowls and called it a good morning. Moms bought it because it lasted a week and cost less than a movie ticket. You ate it because it was sweet. Kind of. It came in huge bags that barely fit in the pantry. You clipped it shut with a clothespin and prayed for freshness. The marshmallows crumbled, the flakes broke, but it fed the whole house and nobody dared waste it. In the 1970s, off-brand cereal was not shameful. It was smart. And if you were lucky, it even came in chocolate. Dry milk in cardboard cartons was one of those things that sat on pantry shelves like an unspoken badge of struggle. You mixed it with tap water in a big plastic pitcher, stirred for what felt like forever, and waited for the foam to settle. It never tasted quite right. The color was just a little off, but it was there. It was milk, kind of. And when you could not afford the real thing, it kept your cereal from going dry. For a lot of families in the 1990s, this was not a backup. It was the only option. Fresh milk meant a trip to the store and several dollars you probably did not have. But powdered milk? That stuff lasted forever and worked in a pinch for everything from boxed macaroni to pancake batter. You learned to look past the taste. You stopped complaining because everyone else at school had milk and you were just glad to have something close. Moms mixed it with a little real milk to stretch the carton. Kids closed their eyes and drank it fast. And that little box in the cabinet reminded you what it meant to get by. It was weird, it was chalky, and it helped families survive. They sold it like a complete meal, but most of us just saw a box of dry noodles and powder and figured we would make it work. Pepsi has a decent rival in Coca-Cola, which also faced a significant setback similar to Pepsi's 1992 hiccup with the launch of New Coke. Coming around much earlier in 1985 than its counterpart Crystal, it was intended to be an amped-up version of the already dominant Coke. Bigwigs up in the company must not have thought of how people would react, because it was not at all positive. People thought this was a cheap attempt at imitating Pepsi's sweeter taste, and it did not enjoy any of the success of Pepsi, despite being a pretty long-running product. New Coke got old pretty fast, and while it stayed until 2001, the company decided that the diminishing returns were not worth it anymore. Coca-Cola proceeded to discontinue it in 2002, and now it is a version of Coke most people do not even remember. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Nestlé had kids everywhere asking, "What's in the Wonder Ball?" This chocolate-coated mystery treat was a real adventure. Each hollow ball of milk chocolate was filled with tiny candy surprises, and unwrapping it felt like opening a treasure chest. The candy inside came in fun shapes and themes, from cartoon characters to animals, making every Wonder Ball feel like a personalized gift from the candy gods. But it wasn't just the candy that made Wonder Ball memorable. It was the sheer excitement of the unknown. The foil wrapper and colorful box promised a surprise every time. For kids, it combined 2 irresistible things: sweets and toys. However, the fun came to a halt in 1997 when Nestlé pulled Wonder Ball off shelves due to safety concerns. The small candies inside posed a choking hazard, and for a time, the concept of mixing food and surprises became controversial. Fans were thrilled when it made a comeback in 2000 with candy instead of toys inside, but the magic wasn't quite the same. Eventually, the Wonder Ball faded again, leaving behind fond memories of a sweeter, more adventurous time in snacking history. Canned Spam was the meat that needed no fridge and barely needed a reason. You popped the lid with a key or your finger and slid out a jelly-covered block of mystery. You sliced it thin, fried it hard, and drowned it in mustard. It was salty, greasy, and so processed it almost squeaked. But it was meat. It filled sandwiches. It topped rice. It bulked up macaroni. You flipped it like pancakes on a hot skillet and called it dinner. Some people said it was gross. Others called it a lifesaver. You probably called it fine. It was not your favorite, but it was there when you were hungry. Spam came in food boxes, sat on sale shelves, and stayed in pantries for months. It was cheap, it was shelf-stable, and it worked. That was the whole point. You were not buying sirloin. You were feeding 4 people with 1 can. It showed up at family breakfasts and potluck casseroles. Some people hated it. Others made it a tradition. But if you were broke in the 1970s, Spam was meat, and that was enough. There was something about peeling back that freezer door and seeing that brick-shaped 5-pack of frozen burritos sitting in the frosted corner. You knew exactly what dinner looked like that night, and probably lunch the next day too. These were not gourmet. They were barely identifiable as burritos sometimes. A smear of bean, maybe a whisper of cheese, all wrapped in a tortilla that got hard on the edges no matter how long you microwaved it. But they were cheap. Dirt cheap. Less than $2 for 5 of them, and they filled you up faster than anything else in the frozen section. Kids could make them on their own. Parents could stretch them into a side dish, add a little salsa if they had it, maybe slice one open and pretend it was something more than what it was. The freezer always had a pack or 2 tucked behind the ice cubes. And somehow, no matter how bad they tasted, they hit the spot. Especially after school or on nights when money was too tight for takeout or even pasta. These burritos were survival food. They were microwave staples for latchkey kids and broke college students. They were dependable in a way fancier food could never be. You might not have bragged about them, but you were grateful. Crystal Pepsi was an incredibly popular and fresh take on the already iconic drink introduced in 1992. It looked different and very refreshing. Partially due to its new formula, which made it look like a much clearer version of the original, Crystal Pepsi was made and advertised to look less like the original Pepsi soda and more like a healthier and less sugary alternative. People did initially like how it shook up the cola flavors they were used to, and it lasted on that hype for a good year. Still, more and more people thought that this was just missing the essential Pepsi element. When you go into a store and see that logo, a certain flavor pops up in your head. Whatever Crystal had was definitely not that, and so unfortunately, it was discontinued in 1993 because people wanted their OG Pepsi back. Lots of them started to find it boring and bland, so it had no market potential. Nothing screams 1980s snack time nostalgia quite like the creamy, frosty delight of Jell-O pudding pops. A creation by the Kraft-owned Jell-O brand, these frozen treats emerged as a must-have dessert for families across America. They were pudding elevated to a frosty perfection that melted just right on your tongue. And let's not forget those wooden sticks that gave every bite a hint of nostalgia and the occasional splinter. Originally marketed with the help of Bill Cosby in a series of wildly successful commercials, pudding pops were everywhere. They were stocked in freezer aisles nationwide and were as much a cultural staple as Saturday morning cartoons. What really set them apart was the perfect blend of creamy texture and frozen treat, making them unlike anything else at the time. No wonder they felt like a reward for good report cards and mowed lawns. So why did they disappear? Some say it was production costs that couldn't compete with simpler ice cream novelties. Others blame marketing missteps after the product was handed off to Popsicle. Attempts to bring them back in the 2000s just weren't the same. The texture changed, and they lacked that classic magic. Day-old bread was a hidden treasure hunt, if you knew where to look. Your mom had a favorite shop. It was not a bakery. It was the day-old bread store. Shelves of discounted loaves, bent buns, and broken bagels lined up like misfit toys. You grabbed what you could. White bread, wheat bread, hamburger rolls with one smashed side. You had to check for mold, sure, but you also found surprises. Honey wheat, raisin swirl, hot dog buns in winter. The smell was amazing. The prices were even better. You could get 5 loaves for the cost of 1. At home, you froze most of it, ate the rest fast, toasted it, buttered it, grilled it. If it was dry, you made it into stuffing. If it was too far gone, it became breadcrumbs. Nothing was wasted. The bread store was not fancy, but it kept your lunchbox full. And in the 1970s, full was all that mattered. You opened the cabinet, grabbed the can with the plain label, and hoped today's batch had a little more meat than the last. Generic canned chili was a poor person's feast in the 1990s. Thick, sloppy, a little mysterious, and always hot. It came in a dented can with a no-name brand, and the ingredients list was vague at best. But it was food. You poured it over rice or crushed up saltines into it. You spooned it over a baked potato if you had one. Some people ate it cold straight from the can. The texture was questionable, the flavor was heavy on spice and light on substance, but it stuck to your ribs. You got a full stomach for about $1, and that was all that mattered. If you had cheese, great. If you had hot dogs, even better. But if all you had was the can, that was still enough to feed a hungry mouth. It became a go-to dinner on cold nights, a quick lunch before the second shift, or a last-minute fix when there was nothing else. Canned chili never tried to be fancy. And maybe that is why it earned a quiet kind of loyalty. It was always there when you needed it. Bad attempts at improving what already works, Pepsi-Cola was the next surge. Supposedly a coffee-based drink that still worked in the Pepsi flavor you knew and loved, it came around in 1996 when it was first being test-marketed. Boy, was that one train wreck of a test, because initial feedback alone was a definite no from the get-go. People did not react well to the drink much, though some positive reviewers from brave and bold soda enthusiasts were there. Not enough to shake the fiscal reports sadly, because after its official launch, it didn't even last a good year. The reasons for its bad performance in the market was that people knew what they wanted, but apparently companies did not. When people wanted a coffee-based drink, there were many better options to go to. When they just wanted a Pepsi, nothing else could replace it. Safe to say, fixing a very well-functioning clock leads to a pretty steep hole in the bank accounts, huh? Once upon a time, in the enchanted ovens of the Keebler elves, there emerged a cookie that was part treat, part treasure. Keebler Magic Middles. Introduced in the 1980s, these cookies were nothing short of a snack-time masterpiece. From the outside, they looked like your standard shortbread cookie, but one bite revealed the magic. A gooey, decadent center filled with either creamy chocolate or buttery caramel. It was like the elves had figured out how to bake happiness into every bite. Magic Middles quickly became a fan favorite, beloved for their unique texture and indulgent flavor. The contrast between the crumbly outer shell and the warm, molten filling made them feel like a gourmet treat, even if you were eating them straight out of the bag in front of the TV. Despite their popularity, these little treasures disappeared in the mid-1990s. Keebler has never given a definitive reason, but some speculate that production costs or shifts in consumer trends were to blame. Fans have been calling for their return ever since, even launching petitions and social media campaigns. Sadly, the elves seem to have retired this recipe for good, leaving us with only sweet memories, and maybe a little hope that one day, magic might strike again. Canned Vienna sausages were soft, salty, and kind of weird, but they worked. You popped the lid and pulled out a row of pale, jelly-covered mini hot dogs packed tight in mystery water. They smelled like a meat factory and looked like baby food for adults. But you ate them cold with crackers or fried them in a pan and called it breakfast. They were cheap, portable, and weirdly satisfying. Each sausage was the size of your finger and had the consistency of room-temperature butter. You could not slice them without squishing them, but you did anyway, because they were meat, and meat was meat, especially when money was tight. You found them in discount stores, food pantries, and packed in your lunchbox when there was nothing else. They did not require refrigeration, which made them a pantry MVP, and no matter how questionable they looked, you were always glad they were there. They came in pop-top cans with paper labels that peeled off in the heat, and no matter how many times you gagged at the first bite, you always finished the can. They lasted forever in the cupboard. They showed up during hurricanes, blackout dinners, and those long weeks before payday. Canned Vienna sausages were not loved, but they were there. And when you had nothing else, that was enough. Frozen, it did not need a can opener. It did not drip oil on your hands. Pouch-packed tuna was a quiet revolution in 1990s poor kitchens, a protein that was cheap, shelf-stable, and weirdly convenient. You could eat it straight from the pouch or mix it into whatever was lying around. Macaroni, rice, salad, crackers, tuna made it work. No draining, no mess. Just rip it open, squeeze it out, and stir. Some pouches were plain. Others came seasoned, maybe with lemon or pepper if you were lucky. But no matter the flavor, the idea was the same. Cheap fish that lasted forever and fed whoever was hungry. It was a step up from canned tuna because it felt a little easier, a little faster. You could keep a few in your backpack, your desk, even your glove compartment. People surviving on food stamps knew the value. Students and single parents kept it on standby. And even though it kind of smelled like cat food, it packed protein that helped you get through the day. It was weird, it was reliable, and it reminded you that survival sometimes came in a soft silver pouch. Before you go, tell us which banned 80s drink surprised you most. Tap like if this brought back memories and subscribe so you never miss another look at things we trusted before we knew better.